Quick reminder, this presentation will be posted on Google Classroom after today. It will be sent out. We will be hosting a FAFSA workshop on October 13. So today we're going to provide an overview on the different types of financial aid packages and types of aid, whereas the workshop and FAFSA workshop, that's October 13. So 2 Thursdays from now after school in the Media Center will be specifically a working session for up to 50 families, where we are going to get started on the FAFSA application process. Right. So without further ado, Mr. Iacovelli.
Thank you, Mrs. Muglia. And again, good evening, everyone. As Mrs. Muglia had mentioned, my name is John Iacovelli, and this evening I am representing New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, or HESAA, one of many acronyms you will hear this evening. And so I just wanted to start by letting you know who I am representing this evening. Let's go to the next slide. Before we get into the real nitty-gritty of financial aid as seen by the parent or the student, I always like to have this one slide and take about 3 or 4 minutes of your time to look at financial aid from a completely different perspective. I want you to look at financial aid from the other side of the desk, looking at it as a professional financial aid officer. I always find it helps somewhat. And as you will probably know, if you're dealing with financial aid officers in a financial aid office, their primary goal is to assist families and their students in paying for college. And you may say, well, that's obvious, but during all of the years, and it's a lot of them, I've been involved with admissions and financial aid for well over 45 years. There are a significant number of parents and students who almost look at the financial aid office as an obstacle. And I think I can answer that as we get further down on this slide. But imagine yourself just for a couple of minutes that you're not the student, but you're the financial aid officer. Well, if you're the financial aid officer and you want to help students and parents, the first thing you have to do is evaluate the family's ability to pay for educational costs. And the only way we can do that is by having you file a free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. No matter what school you go to, no matter what style of school you go to, everything from a 2-year business school through a 2-year community college, all the way up to Princeton or Harvard, and everybody in between, if you're seeking financial assistance, you must file the free application for federal student aid. There's no other way of getting around it, because that's our evaluation piece. And we're going to get deep into that as we go deeper into my presentation. Number 2, as a financial aid officer, you are here to help me, if I'm the director of financial aid, to distribute limited resources in an equitable manner. What is the key word in that sentence? It's limited. Quite frankly, folks, there's not enough to go around. A good 8 to 10 years ago, there was an excellent article in the Wall Street Journal where these 2 journalists worked together. And what they did is they looked at a sample of well over 1,000 families. They tracked the families filing the FAFSA. They knew that when the FAFSA came through, they had something called an expected family contribution, which tells us the family's ability to pay. They knew the cost of attendance at the schools, and they could see the financial aid package that each of these students got at those schools. What was the end result of this? The end result was, what they found is that for every dollar that was given out in aid, the schools would have needed another $3 to give aid dollar for dollar for the need that was projected by each family. So I don't say that to depress you, but to give you a realistic view of how financial aid offices work. They're going to try as best they can with the limited resources that they have to meet your needs. Also, as a financial aid officer, we try to provide a balance of gift aid and self-help aid. These are 2 terms that I want you to be aware of so they don't throw you off. If you ever hear someone throwing around the term gift aid, What they're really talking about are grants and scholarships, and we're going to go through those in just a few minutes. When you hear the euphemism self-help aid, what they're really talking about there is work on campus. Yes, work is part of a financial aid package, and all the different college loans that are available to you. So again, gift aid, self-help, just so you're familiar with it. Remember what I said previously. There are a few, not a lot, but quite a few families who look at the financial aid office as a barrier. I think part of the reason for that comes under the next part of my slide, where it says, as a financial aid officer, we're here to implement both federal and state regulations. Two of the largest contributors to financial assistance are the federal programs and the state programs. The state, HESAA, who I'm representing this evening. Well, each of them have their own set of rules and guidelines that we as financial aid officers have to abide by. And almost every year or every other year, auditors will come in to make sure that we are giving that money away through their regulations. If we aren't, the school would be liable for the money that we gave out in financial aid. Not the student. The student got the money a year or 2 years beforehand, but the school would be liable. And I think sometimes when financial aid offices ask for more data, it seems like a hassle to the family or to the student, when in reality, all they're trying to do is make sure that they've done everything through the proper regulations from the feds and the state. So I just wanted to share that with you before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the financial aid, and just have you see financial aid, as I like to say, from the other side of the desk. Having said that, let's move to the next slide and get into it. I will tell you this, I am about ready to share with you a ton of information. So I hope folks are taking notes, and remember the title of my presentation, Demystifying the Process. Well, if you're going to demystify something, you're going to simplify it. And how's this for simplifying it? When you think of financial aid, very easily think of this: 4 sources, 4 types. 4 sources, 4 types. What are those 4 sources? Well, the college and university that you may be attending, the federal government with all of its programs, and we're going to go through those this evening, the state of New Jersey, or HESAA, and we'll go through all of their programs. And then you can see the 4th one. I call it outside organizations, but we're really talking about private scholarships. Let's make private scholarships real easy. If you're looking for local scholarships, maybe it's a Rotary Club or a Lions Club or something, memorial scholarship that Edison High School has, whatever it may be, any local scholarship, your experts are your guidance department. They're going to have that out on their website, out on Naviance, whatever, but they're the experts. Anything you want to know about a local scholarship that may be available, you go right to them. But there's another side of private scholarships, and I call that the national. You have local and you have national. And on the national side, there are many ways to look at national scholarships. One that I particularly like, I've seen a lot of students use it over the last almost close to 20 years, is something called FastWeb. FASTWEB, fastweb.com. It is a free service, and all you need to do is go on there electronically, create the profile of the student in question, send that off to FastWeb, and they will run that profile against thousands upon thousands of private scholarships to see if there are matches. When they get back to you with the matches, it could be 5 matches, it could be 20 or 25 matches, depends on what the profile has on it. And once you get those are the ones that you want to go after. You want to write essays, compete to get the particular scholarship. All they're doing is supplying reliable sources for you. Remember, 4 sources, 4 types. What are the types? Well, grants and scholarships, and there is a difference. I'm going to show you in a second the differences there. Employment, working on campus, and all the different college loans. Let's start with employment just to get it out of the way. A lot of people don't realize that when you're putting together what we call a financial aid package, that part of the elements in the financial aid package could be a work-study job on campus, okay? Employment is the only form of financial aid that is not immediately put towards the bill that you receive from the college or university. If your student has work on campus, they're going to work 5, 8, 10 hours a week, whatever it might be. And every other week, they're going to get a paycheck. And you may say, well, that's not really helping me with the cost. But in a way, it is, because that 18-year-old who goes off to college for you is still a consumer. And they're going to need money, everything for buying a new college sweatshirt to going out with their friends to go bowling or get a midnight hoagie. They're going to need spending money. They're either going to get it from you every time they visit, or they're going to have a little job on campus, okay? Let's look at two other types of financial aid, grants and scholarships. When you hear the term grant or grant and aid, you're talking about something that is need-based, which means you filed the FAFSA or another vehicle called Css Profile, which we'll talk about in a minute. You showed need, and that school or that organization is willing to give you a grant or grant and aid. So grant need-based. But as you know, many colleges, not all, but many colleges give scholarships. And that's merit-based. Could be academic, could be athletic, could be musical. There's a variety of reasons why a college will use scholarships. One is to leverage their enrollment. Quite frankly, they offer you a scholarship many times, an academic scholarship, to try to induce you to come to their school. But you may have a special talent, whether it's in athletics, or a particular sport, or music, some instrument that they desperately need at the school, and you may get a scholarship for that. So they're separate and distinct. Let's give you an example of how that could work. Very practical application. We're going to say in this example that the student is looking at Rider University. I'm just going to use this as an example. It just so happens that although Rider is very good with the School of Business, they're very famous for their School of Business, they also have quite a few scholarships each year for theater. And yes, students will compete. They'll come to Rider, they'll go through an audition, and if they're considered to have the proper talent level that they're looking for, you could get a theatrical scholarship at Rider University. So in our example, we're going to say that yes, your son or daughter is involved with theater, and they go to this audition, and they love them, and they let's say they offer them a $10,000 theatrical scholarship. Okay, a week or two goes by, you've filed your FAFSA. Once your FAFSA is filed, it goes to the schools that you put on the FAFSA, and one of those schools was Rider. Rider then looks at your FAFSA information and says, look, this particular student also has need. And so they want to give the student a Rider grant and aid. All right, so now we have a Rider grant and aid. We have a scholarship. They might even throw a little employment in there. And you can see slowly but surely we're putting together what I referred to before as a financial aid package, okay? So understand the difference between grants and scholarships and how the Financial Aid Office puts the package together. We're going to get into a greater detail with that down the line here in one of my, or actually two of my slides. So again, before we get off of this slide, just remember 4 sources, 4 types. And with that, we're going to go to the next slide. Now, this is one of a few slides, about 3 or 4 slides that I needed to put into our presentation. I call these the electronic tools that both the federal government and a couple others that the state government provides. This is one from the federal government. It's called Net Price Calculator. Back in 2008, 2009, the federal government passed a law saying that if you wanted to receive federal grants and scholarships, you must have something called Net Price Calculator on your website in the area of your financial aid materials. So every school, unless you wanted to lose a federal financial aid, every school was forced to develop what we call Net Price Calculator. What the feds were looking to do was to give students and parents a better vision, better transparency in how much you would actually pay for college. Even back in 2008, 2009, They saw the rising cost of college education, and they knew that those costs were intimidating many parents and many students from even looking at college. So hence, the development of an electronic tool from the feds called Net Price Calculator. Because it was imposed on the schools, I'm going to be very honest with you. There are some schools who've done a terrific job with Net Price Calculator. I was with one of my HESAA colleagues last summer, and together we were looking at Princeton University's Net Price Calculator, and we looked at it, quite frankly, as two professionals, we looked at it in amazement. It was the best Net Price Calculator I've ever seen at any school. But because it was imposed by the federal government, some schools, it's not so much, as they like to say. So some are excellent, others not so much. But again, Net Price Calculator as a tool to help you in knowing what the real net price out of pocket would be for the family if you were going to attend that particular school. That's its purpose. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is another financial aid electronic tool that the feds had developed. I think this is about the third year of this. I love this one, quite frankly. It's called College Scorecard. And at the bottom, you can see the website, collegescorecard.ed.gov. Why do I love this one? Please remember my background. I'm a former Dean of Enrollment at Stockton University, which means for many, many years, I had both admissions and financial aid under my leadership. When I look at College Scorecard, although the feds created this as a financial aid tool, I look at College Scorecard as a great tool when you're in the college selection process. Look at the things that you have when you're looking at a school under College Scorecard. Graduation rates, annual cost, the median earnings of a graduate. These are things that you would like to know, especially if you're looking at college through what I call a value-added approach. Not just prestige, not just looking for top name schools because you're impressed by the name of the school, but value-added approach. And things like this, I think, really help. And it'll be underscored when we go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. Let's say you had a top 4 or top 6 or even top 8 schools. You could put them all up on that website and compare them. And that's what you see here in this slide. You can look at NJIT, College of New Jersey, or whoever you're looking at, and make comparisons on data that I think would be very important, especially if you had a top 3 or 4 schools and you wanted to discern, does one have an edge over the other for our family? So College Scorecard, I'm a big, big fan of, and I hope that many of you use it when you're in the college selection process. I really believe it's more of a college selection tool than it is a financial aid tool. So with that, let's move on to the next one. Now, remember what I said previously. No matter what school you go to, you know that if you're going to look for any type of financial assistance, even if it's just a college loan that you're looking for, you must file the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. For the senior parents who are listening to me, the earliest you can fill it out is October 1st. Parents, let me tell you this. Filing a FAFSA is not like competing for hard-to-get concert tickets, okay? If Billy Joel is coming to New York and you want to make sure you get tickets to the Billy Joel concert, you know if it says October 1st, you have to be there right at October 1st. But although October 1st is the first day you can file the FAFSA, whether you fill it out the 1st, the 4th, the 10th of October, October 30th, maybe even the first week or 2 of November, you're still early. You're still early. There's no brownie points for getting up at 12:01, a minute after midnight, going onto the website and trying to get your FAFSA done by 12:45. that night. Again, early means the first 4 to 6 weeks, not just October 1st. Now, as you get into or past Thanksgiving, now you're starting to get later. And then if you get to the Christmas, New Year's time, then you're getting latest. You're probably hurting yourself if you wait that long. But just remember, early is a good 4 to 6 week window. It's not a one-day window. So don't feel you have to file it right on October 1st. Okay? Now, many of you will be looking at schools who not only want you to file the FAFSA, but they also want you to file something called CSS Profile. That's College Scholarship Service Profile. As you can see from my slide, this is not free. It costs $25 for the first school, and then any additional schools is an extra $16 each. Who would want you to file a CSS Profile? The best way to characterize this is if you are looking at schools that, number one, are very hard to get into, and number two, are very, very expensive, more likely than not, that school will also want you to file CSS Profile. Let me give you a little genre of the schools that would want CSS Profile. Maybe your son or daughter is looking at NYU. Maybe they're looking at Villanova. Maybe they're looking at Boston U or Boston College, Amherst, Williams College, maybe Colgate, maybe Carnegie Mellon. Any of the Ivy League schools, of course, will want CSS Profile. Duke will want it. You get the idea. What schools don't want it? Well, SUNY Binghamton, they won't ask for it. Rutgers won't ask for it. University of Delaware won't. St. Joseph's College in PA, they won't. LaSalle won't. None of the state colleges that I know of, although the College of New Jersey dabbled in it a couple of years and then dropped out, okay? So you get the idea. Penn State doesn't need it. University of Maryland doesn't need it. So again, if your son or daughter has a list and you know in that top 5 or 7 schools that they're looking at, that there are some schools of that genre that I mentioned, you know, very hard to get into, very competitive and very expensive, look at their website. More likely than not, they'll want you to file something called CSS Profile. Why would they want you to do that? Because those schools have their own grant and aid money, and they feel they're not getting enough what we like to call robust information from the FAFSA. So you will find that CSS Profile asks questions that are more introspective, more full to get the family's financial strengths than the FAFSA does. So again, part of the motivation here is with CSS Profile, they're using that data to give their own grant and aid money, and they feel that the federal FAFSA is not complete for them to do that. That's the motivation. So again, if your son or daughter is looking at those types of schools, just make sure you're also filing CSS Profile, not just FAFSA. Okay, having said that, let's go to the next page. Now, when you are ready to file the FAFSA, this is now for the senior parents who are listening to me. When you're ready to file the 23-24, because that will be your student's freshman year, when you're ready to file the 23-24 FAFSA application, I recommend that you have your tax return in front of you, a copy of that in front of you, and the W-2s. You might not have to use it directly, but I think it helps to have it there. Now, when looking at the FAFSA, I like to characterize it as a one-step, two-step operation. Step one is for the parent and the student to create what is known as an FSA ID. Remember, the FAFSA is purely electronic, and because it's electronic and because it is a legal document, it does have private information, financial information from your family on it. It needs to be signed. And so you can't sit there the old-fashioned way and put a John Hancock anywhere. So you're going to create an FSA ID. That'll be your electronic signature. One for the parent and one for each student who you're filing a FAFSA for. Many of the families listening to me this evening have more than one going to school. So each student will have their own unique FAFSA ID, but the parent can use their FAFSA ID for each of the 1, 2, 3, however many students are going off to school. Now, I know from these types of meetings that besides senior parents, I also probably have some sophomore or junior parents listening in on this presentation as well. Does that mean you have to wait until October 1st of the following year if you're a junior to file a FAFSA? Yes, but if you go out to the FAFSA website, fafsa.gov, and you scroll through the front page of that, you will find that there's something on there called Fafsa Forecaster. That's F-A-F-S-A, the number 4, caster, C-A-S-T-E-R. What this tool does, the federal government developed this a good 8 to 10 years ago. What this tool does, it allows you to go out and get an unofficial expected family contribution. It's not an official thing, but if you're a junior and you want to know where you're going to fall when you do file the FAFSA in the senior year, this may be a tool that you want to just go home and do. It only takes about a half an hour to complete the Fafsa Forecaster. And again, it's unofficial, but at least it shows you the range of where you would fall come senior year when you are actually filling out the official financial aid form. So keep that in mind as well. Now, in filing the FAFSA for 23-24, you will notice that it's the 2021 federal tax return that they're interested in. That's the information you're going to put on there, the 2021 information. This is something in financial aid parlance that we call prior year. We've been doing this now for a good 4, almost 5 years now, and it works out very, very well. And the reason it works out well is because they want to use the 2021 and not your 2022, which you won't be filling out for another 3 months, it means that just about everybody who filed a tax return, well over 99% of people who file a tax return, well, your 2021 is long completed. So it will definitely be from a completed return. Please pay attention to what I'm about to say. It would be very, very helpful for you. When you are there filling out a FAFSA and you electronically fill in the little bubble that says, yes, this is from a completed return, a message will pop up. And that message will ask you whether you are going to provide the federal income tax data, or do you want that to come from the IRS data retrieval tool? I am here to tell you that 999 out of 1,000 of you want to say to them, I am not going to provide the federal tax data. Please go get it from the IRS data retrieval tool. Why am I emphasizing this? I'm emphasizing it because when you look at the federal processor, the people who process FAFSAs, okay, for initial FAFSAs, meaning first-time users of the FAFSA, which all freshmen are, there is almost a 70% chance that you will be tagged for what they call the federal verification process. And what the federal verification process is, it's a nice sounding euphemism for saying, we're going to audit you. So if they're going to audit you, you want to make sure that the audit is an easy one for you. Let it be difficult for them. And if your information came from the IRS data retrieval tool, that's where they're going to get it if you were tagged for federal verification. You'll worry about things like proving what the household size and number going to college would be and all that stuff. But it's very nice if you're going through income verification that you marked properly that it was the IRS data retrieval tool, which means you have no responsibility with that in the verification process. Just makes it easier when you're going down the line. Okay? So with that in mind, let's go to the next slide.
And I just wanted to also note that for our seniors, you are going to be completing the 2023-2024 FAFSA application, as Mr. Iacobelli mentioned, but you're actually going to be filing the FAFSA every single year whilst you are an undergraduate in college, and it will be every spring. It will be during the time when you're registering for your classes, because your college, your final destination is going to need to know how you're paying. So the FAFSA report is the way that they're going to know whether or not you will still be needing your loans, subsidized, unsubsidized, or work study, and what have you. So you will be filing FAFSA every single year, every single term, essentially.
Okay, so now we've filed the FAFSA, and there are some very important questions that you need to know the answer to. Why did I file the FAFSA in the first place? What are they doing with my data? And then how will that data that they got from me be applied? Well, let's go through each one. The core essence of why you filed that free application for federal student aid was so that that federal processor could develop an expected family contribution, or EFC, probably the most important acronym of the evening. When they get your data, when you electronically submit it, it's going to go through a process that is called federal methodology. You might even hear the term uniform methodology. Don't let it throw you off. Federal uniform means the exact same thing. And that is the methodology that they use to create each individual family's expected family contribution. Okay? Now, an EFC, when it comes back, can give you a lot of varying results because you have a lot of people. I mean, if you look from it from a statistical standpoint, somewhere between 11 to 12 million people nationally file the FAFSA each year. So the range of expected family contributions go from 0 all the way up to 99999. And in fact, when you look at the data year after year, somewhere around 1 million people of those 11 to 12 million who filed the FAFSA, they get an EFC of 0. What does that mean? It means that they looked at your financial situation, and the 0 indicates that they don't expect $1 to go towards, from that family to go towards the college education. It means that the student is the highest need they could possibly be. Well, what if you're very, very worldly successful? You're making heavy 6-figure salaries. Well, you may still fill out the FAFSA, and you'll see why as we go through the explanations here. But you might come out close to 99999, meaning you're not eligible for any need-based aid, okay? So most of us listening this evening are going to fall somewhere in between the 0s and the 999. But I want you to keep in mind what I just told you about expected family contributions as we go to the next slide, because we're going to put all this together. Next slide, please. Cost of attendance. Parents, cost of attendance is a unique financial aid term. It's a financial aid term. Cost of attendance has the immediate cost that your son or daughter will incur in school, of course, tuition and fees, and if they live on campus, room and board. But both federal and state governments allow us to put together in the cost of attendance other consumer costs. We're legally allowed to put that in. So for instance, since I retired from Stockton, I'll use them as a familiar thing since I know the numbers very well. If you were in state living on campus, your cost of attendance at Stockton this year would be right around $32,000. Well, will it cost you $32,000 to send your son or daughter to Stockton? Well, no, because your tuition and fees for full time are right around $15,000, a little less than $15,000 for the year. And then depending on the room, whether you're a single room or double room, where you're at, and the meal plan that you pick, that's another $10,000 to $11,000. So more likely than not, it's right around $25,000, no more higher than $26,000. Well, if that's the immediate cost, why am I allowed to use the $31,000 or $32,000 for cost of attendance? Because the federal government and the state government allow us. They recognize other costs that you will incur being a college student. Now we're going to put the two together. We have cost of attendance and we have expected family contribution. And let's go to the next slide. And we're going to give you a very practical way, once you have this knowledge, how you can look at this for all the different schools that your student is looking at. okay? For all schools, again, whether it's a two-year college, a trade school, or whether it's Harvard or Princeton, all financial aid offices essentially work the same way. And you're looking at the blueprint of that right now. It's cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals that family's need. And that need will be the guide when we're putting together the financial aid package for each individual student and family. In our example here, we're going to say that you applied to 3 different schools. One private. For a private school, let's use, since you guys are up in Edison, you're close enough to it. We're going to say Seton Hall. You applied and got accepted to Seton Hall. You applied and got accepted to Kane University. And you also applied and got accepted at Middlesex. Okay? Let's look at Seton Hall first. Their cost of attendance, I might be off a little bit, but I want you to get the principle of how this works. But we're going to say that the cost of attendance at Seton Hall for this coming year is $72,000. You filed your FAFSA, and after you filed your FAFSA, it came back to you in the form of something called an electronic student aid report, or ESAR. And on that, there was a lot of information on there, but one of the things was telling you what your expected family contribution was. And in our example, we're going to say your EFC, your expected family contribution, was $12,000. Okay, let's put that to work. We're going to subtract the $12,000 EFC from the $72,000 cost of attendance at Seton Hall. That means that in our example, that particular family has a $60,000 need. That financial aid office is going to do their best to put together a $60,000 package for that family. They might not get all the way there, but that's what their goal is. So that package could have a lot of different elements in it, trying to put a $60,000 package together. Okay, same student. They're going to live on campus. They're going to a state college, Kane University, on campus, in state, probably around $32,000. Okay, 32,000 minus 12 is 20,000. Financial aid office at Kane is going to try to put together a $20,000 package. Might not get there, but that's what their goal is. Third example, same student. Third example, Middlesex County College. Cost of attendance probably around 12,000. Your EFC was 12,000. You subtract one from the other, and at that particular school, you're what we term a no need. So here's the same student, and they're getting wildly different financial aid packages because of the cost of the different schools that they were looking to attend. If they're looking at a private school that's very expensive, probably would get a larger package. If they're looking at an intermediate or average cost of attendance, like at Kane or a Stockton or a Montclair, something like that, the middle cost. And then, of course, at their county college, they could handle that cost on their own. So that definition that I just gave you and that application, any parent can do that. Now that you know this, as your son or daughter gets accepted to schools and you look out on the website and you know what the cost of attendance at that school is, and the federal processor has sent you the EFC, that gives you the basis for knowing or expecting approximately how much aid that particular school can offer you. Very important for you to know. And that's very important information to have if you are ever going to negotiate with the school. If you feel that the package that they gave you was too low, you would be able to use these numbers to support your case. Very intelligent way of talking to financial aid officers and negotiating out, especially if you feel that the amount of the package is less than you really need, or that you should have had, I should say. Okay? So now, having seen that, we've made little financial aid officers out of all of you, because that's the principle of how it works. Let's go to the next slide. Remember what I said previously. There were some that I characterized as electronic tools. I gave you two from the feds, College Scorecard and Net Price Calculator. Here's one of two from HESAA, from the state of New Jersey. And this one's called New Jersey shopping sheet. You're going to find that as a tool, the New Jersey shopping sheet is very, very similar to the federal net price calculator. Well, why did HESAA feel that it needed to put together this shopping sheet? For what I told you when I was explaining the net price calculator. Remember what I said with net price calculator? There's some schools that did an absolute bang up terrific job with it, and others, not so much. Well, by having this come directly from HESAA, everybody has that shopping sheet, which also acts like the net price calculator, and you know that it's at a level where it could really help you, especially families that are looking for that transparency. What is my real net cost at these schools that I'm looking at? And that's where New Jersey shopping sheet can be very, very helpful to you. Okay, next slide. Way back, the second or third slide that I showed you, 4 sources, 4 types. I want to go back to those. Remember, one of the 4 sources was the federal government. And I want to go through the federal government's programs in financial assistance. The big one is Pell Grant. Now, before I get into an explanation of the federal programs, I think it's important for everyone to hear what I'm about to say so that you don't get frustrated with the FAFSA process. Ever since the creation of federal financial grant assistance, which is back in the 70-71 year, and technically or legally it's called Title IV funds. Since the creation of Title IV funds, federal grant programs have always been earmarked for the highest need, lowest income students. I'll repeat that. Highest need, lowest income students. Remember when I showed you the range on the EFC from 0 to 99999, okay? If you had a 0 EFC, meaning that you went through the FAFSA process and you can't afford 1 dime towards your son or daughter's education, that means you are going to get a maximum Pell Grant. And the maximum for the upcoming year is $6,895. Also, because you had that 0 index, there's another program that's campus-based called the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or SEOG. I kind of characterize it as Super Pell. You can get up to $4,000, but it's very rare that someone gets $4,000. Probably more like $1,000 or $2,000 extra because they try to spread that limited amount around. So again, if you had a 0 index, these are 2 things that you would get. If you had a 0 index and you were going into the teaching profession, you may be eligible for the Teach Grant. So you can see all of these programs are federal and all of them are earmarked towards the highest need, lowest income families. So just keep that in mind. If you're not in that category, don't get frustrated with the process. As you will see as we go through these other slides, there are other types of aid that you may be eligible for. It's just that this is how the feds have categorized their assistance since its inception. Now, let's go to the next slide. You saw the feds. Now we're going to show you the state of New Jersey. The largest of the grants in the state of New Jersey is called Tuition Aid Grant, or TAG. And you can see from the award amounts on TAG, they potentially can be a lot more than the federal programs. As a matter of fact, to show you how different the state programs are from the feds, remember what I said with the feds, highest need, lowest income families only. Last year, the HESAA, the state of New Jersey, distributed a little over 77,000 TAG grants to students around the state, to the tune of right around $250 million. That's $50 to $55 million more than the Pell Grant that was distributed throughout the state. As a matter of fact, New Jersey is the only state in the union where the state grant, the distribution of the state grant, is larger than the federal grant distribution. And in our case, far larger. Okay? So when you talk about the state of New Jersey, you know, there's a lot of things that we can criticize in New Jersey. You know, our property tax isn't right where it should be. There's a lot of tolls on our major roads, and we don't a lot of times see the results of their construction on the roads, but we see the money going every time we drive on them. A lot of things to criticize in the state of New Jersey. I've lived here my whole life. I get it. But one of the ones you can't criticize, or it's very hard to criticize, is the state's ability or commitment, if you will, to provide financial assistance, especially for low-income families who are looking to go on to college. They do not want finances to be an excuse for students to not attend college. And I think they've done a very, very good job with a vast, large variety of programs. Now, it would take too long to go through all of these, but I want to get your attention to the bottom of this slide where it says CCOG, Community College Opportunity Grant. If you file a FAFSA and you have an adjusted gross income of $65,000 or less, you are going to be able to go to your local county college, tuition and fees free. It'll be covered for you. The only thing you're covering would be the cost of books and the transportation to and from school. Okay. If you are from 65 to 80,000 in adjusted gross income, although it won't cover 100% of your tuition and fees, CCOG guarantees that at least half of those tuition and fees will be covered because your AGI is below 80,000 but above 65,000. Let's go to the next slide real quick.
I just wanted to note for the CCOG Community College Opportunity Grants, we did have a parent who asked about Middlesex County College, now known as Middlesex College. And I will confirm that that county college does participate with this Community College Opportunity Grants. There's no additional application you need to fill out. You just need to complete the FAFSA in order to, for the college to indicate whether or not you are eligible for this grant.
Yes. So CCOG was showing you what we have on the 2-year level. But the state, the governor's office, is also committed to the 4-year level. If you were to look at any of the 12 4 years, or what we call senior colleges in the state, obviously that includes Rutgers with all of its satellites, Camden, New Brunswick, everything, NJIT, and all of the state colleges and universities from Ramapo all the way down to Stockton and everybody in between. Once again, if you had an adjusted gross income on your FAFSA of $65,000 or less, you're going to have tuition and fees covered. They'll be covered both by state and federal awards that you get, and then if by some chance those awards didn't cover it fully, the Garden State Guarantee is going to kick in to guarantee that tuition and all approved fees are covered. And again, if you go up to 80,000, although it doesn't cover 100%, it will cover at least 50% of your tuition and fees guaranteed. So again, these are strong programs. Yes, I'm a parent myself. I put 3 kids through college. And I know that for many of your students, even suggesting that they may want to look at or stay in the state of New Jersey can get them off into a wild anger. I'm not staying in the state. I'm leaving. I'm going to North Carolina or wherever you're going, Florida, wherever I want to go. I get that. But certainly the commitment that the state has made through the Garden State Guarantee and CCOG certainly gives you something very serious to think about and can really make college a real game changer as far as affordability is concerned. So I just wanted you all to know that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now, this is probably the most important of the electronic tools that HESAA offers. It's called the New Jersey Financial Aid Management System, or FAMS. Let me explain. After you file your FAFSA, We know that all the schools that you listed on the FAFSA will electronically get your data. We also know that you've gotten back that document electronically called an Electronic Student Aid Report, or ESAR, which had the EFC on it. But we also know that the federal processor, when they see you have a New Jersey address, they will automatically send your processed FAFSA data. They will send it to HESAA. So you know electronically it's sitting in their computer system. What we want you to do, especially if your student is looking at a school in the state of New Jersey, this is very important then, we want you to create an account in NJFAMS. You can see on this slide, just developing a username and a password. You'll notice that this thing is designed for the 18-year-old college student. I'm here to tell you that, privacy aside, this is a username and a password that parents want to share with their student. We don't want the student holding on to this. Why do I say it that way? I say it that way because for the last 2 years, if HESAA needed additional information from you, they never send paper correspondence anymore. If they want to reach out to you, they do it through NJFAMS. So let's say that you're eligible for a tuition aid grant, a TAG, but they need additional information from you. You wouldn't know about that additional information unless you were regularly going out and looking. It only takes 5-10 seconds, but regularly looking out on the FAM system to see what other information they need from you. So any correspondence with HESAA, you want to do it through, and you have to do it through NJFAMS. Quite frankly, there are many people who will call the HESAA hotline, and they're very frustrated. They're wondering why the tag isn't showing. And the reason it isn't showing is for the last 4 to 6 weeks, HESAA has been trying to reach the student or the parent of the student through the NJFAMS system, and nobody was looking at NJFAMS, which is the reason why I suggested what I did previously. I don't want the student just knowing what the username and password is. I want the parent to know as well, so that someone is systematically, regularly looking at NJFAMS at least once a week. You don't have to do it every day, but at least once a week, so that if anything comes through that you need to know, or if there's follow-up information that they need from you, you're going to be able to respond because you were out on NJFAMS and you know what's going on. Let's go to the next slide. The next 2 slides are all about FAMS. Let's go to the next slide. There are a couple of nice features about NJFAMS as well. Once you have the account up, you've created your own account. You can look for any of the state type scholarships online. You can create to-do lists about financial aid that act as reminders for you. And talking about reminders, because you're in the NJFAM system and they know what year you are, a freshman, sophomore, junior, whatever you are, they'll even give you reminders the next year. As Sinyi had mentioned to you, you're going to be filing a FAFSA every year. And NJFAMS will remind you of that, hey, you're ready for the 24-25 year. You haven't filled it out yet. Let's go. So there's some nice features with it. Let's go to the next slide. I want to show you a practical application of what I was talking about before. This is one of the typical messages that you may get from HESAA through NJFAMS about your TAG grant. And so if you're not out there looking, you wouldn't know about this. You wouldn't, if you don't know about it, you wouldn't know to respond. So I just wanted to show you that example of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis if, in fact, HESAA needs a little bit more information from you to help in the processing of any state grants that you may have. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. We're moving right along pretty good here. All right, loans. Statistically speaking, this may well be the most important slide in my presentation. Why do I say it that way? I say it that way because when you look at the billions of dollars every year that is distributed as financial assistance, as financial aid, you're going to find a 70%, 30% split. 70% self-help, and remember what self-help meant, loans and working on campus. 30% gift aid, grants and scholarships. That's just a statistical fact, okay? So that means that when a college is putting together a financial aid package for you, more likely than not, college loans will be a very important part of that package that they develop for you. Now, remember what I said in the beginning, demystify or simplify the process. When you look at loans, I want you to think of the loans as first tier and second tier. And what you're looking at right now on this slide is the first tier loan. It's called the Federal Direct Loan Program. Again, as I've said this before, no matter what school you go to after you've gotten your high school diploma, whether it's a 2-year trade school or whether it's Yale, Harvard, Princeton, whoever, anybody in between, the first tier loan is the Federal Student Loan Program. Okay? Federal Direct. The Federal Direct Loan comes in 2 flavors, subsidized and unsubsidized. Let's see what that means to you. If you show need on your FAFSA, then all or part of your loan would be subsidized. And what that means is that any accruing interest while the student is in school is going to be covered by the federal government. So from the time you take a loan out the freshman year until 6 months after the student has graduated, let's say, or terminated their college career, that happens sometimes, unfortunately, as well. Okay, that accruing interest, because it was subsidized, that accruing interest is taken care of by the federal government. Any other part of your loan that you may get, or let's say you filed it and you're no need, you have no need at all. You filled it out, you have a very high EFC, and none of your loan can be subsidized. That means you're getting an unsubsidized loan. That means that you are responsible for all accruing interest and the principal. Folks, when you really break down college loans to their essence, a loan is a loan is a loan. Many of us have a loan on our house. We call it a mortgage. Some of us have car loans. Some of us have home equity loans. Well, this is a college loan, but it's still a loan. And what the loan means is that when you sign, whether it's the old-fashioned way or electronically, when you sign the promissory note, the minute you sign the promissory note, that second that happens, interest begins to accrue. So somebody's going to pay that interest. If it's subsidized, the interest is paid by the federal government while you're in school. If it is unsubsidized, you are responsible for the principal and all accruing interest. So if you were to borrow $10,000 a year for 4 straight years to get your son or daughter through college, and you think that you owe $40,000 because it's 10,000 times 40, you're very good in math and extremely naive on how loans work. 4.5 years of unsubsidized loans, probably more like $47,000, $48,000 because you've got the interest rolling into the principal. Okay, so just remember that. And another tip, parents, and again, I say this to you for 45 years of professional experience and the experience of having 3 kids, 2 of which went to very expensive colleges, and trying to control these loans. Here's the principle that I want to share with you. For any unsubsidized loan you get, whether it's this Tier 1 loan, which is the Federal Direct Student Loan, or the ones I'm about to show you on the next slide, any unsubsidized loan, if it is whenever it is possible, pay the accruing interest so it doesn't snowball into the principal. Pay the accruing interest. You'll be doing yourself a favor. Now, look at the maximum awards on this Federal Direct Loan Program. $5,500 for the freshman year, $65 for the sophomore, $75 for the junior, senior. Well, even at a relatively modestly priced school, let's say you were going to go off to Rutgers and you're going to live on campus. Well, again, Rutgers is a state college, and even in state, it's still going to cost you about $32,000, well, not $30,000 to go to school there living on campus. And they're only willing to give you in the first tier of loans, $5,500, let alone going off to a private school that might cost as much as $70,000, $75,000, even $80,000 some schools, okay? So that means that some students will need tier 2 loans, which officially are known as supplemental or alternative loans. Supplemental or alternative loans. Let's go to the next page and look at the 3 of them that you have in front of you. The state of New Jersey, HESAA has one. It's called the NJ Class Family Loan. The federal government has one, the Federal Plus program. And then, of course, I will address the private banks who also will give you college loans. Let's start with HESAA's loan, the NJ Class. Well, as you look at the 2 columns, one of the things that does strike you is that the interest, the percentage on the interest is significantly less for the class than it is the plus. But for me, having put 3 kids through college and knowing that a large number of people listening to me right now on this broadcast, you have more than one student to put through college. Or maybe you're in this session, you've already put one through college, and this is the 2nd or 3rd one that is going off to school, okay? But look at the bottom feature of NJ Class. With NJ Class, both the student and the parent can be the borrower. If you make the student the borrower, then the parent, of course, is going to be a cosigner on that loan. Why could that be important to you? It could be important because you don't want to get gummed up financially with one child, knowing that you have another 1 or 2 coming up the ranks, and you're going to have to help them as well. So having that loan with the student as the borrower and you as a cosigner gives you the leverage that when child number 2 or child number 3 comes along, you might be able to get them an NJ Class as well. Now look at the Federal Plus loan. And by the way, PLUS, that stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. So guess who's responsible 100% for that loan? It's only the parent who can be the borrower in the Plus loan. Now, if you have only one to put through school, I could see certain folks, even with the higher interest rates, going for a Federal Plus loan because they only have one. But I think for the majority of folks, they're going to find that NJ Class is a much more viable option if the Tier 1 loan, the federal direct loan, is not enough and you need to go somewhere. And unlike the state grant money, which must stay in state, NJ Class can go out of state. So if you have a student going off to North Carolina or Florida or Hawaii or wherever they're going, NJ Class can follow them to the school of their choice. So just keep that in mind as well. Then we have the 3rd column. And the 3rd column are private loans. Some popular names. Many of you have heard of Sallie Mae. Many of you know that Citibank has something called City Assist, which is their name or brand for college loans. Citizens Bank down in the Philadelphia and Trenton area, they have college loans. And one you see on TV. As a matter of fact, I was watching a sporting event just last night, and the company is called SoFi, S-O with a little hyphen F-I, SoFi. They really appeal to young people, and again, they have these products that are college loans or the consolidation of college loans. I am not a big fan of private college loans. Being both in admissions and financial aid, I always advise parents that when you get down to the nitty-gritty of your college list, if there's a particularly favorite school that your son or daughter is looking at, and the only way you're going to be able to go to that school is if you're going to take a private loan for 4 straight years, I would strongly recommend that you look at that list again and maybe get rid of that school and look at Plan B or Plan C. This is one of the reasons why you see so many thousands of students and their families getting inundated with college loans. You hear stories, and they're real stories, of students graduating, some not even graduating, but graduating to get their baccalaureate degree, just their baccalaureate degree, and they've got $80,000 to $150,000 over their head. That is not a good policy or a good philosophy to follow. Try to stay away. I think the private loans are best served or best used when you have a one-shot incident or deal. Your son or daughter is going to go to school for 4 or 5 years to get their undergraduate degree. And as we all know, having families, stuff happens. So if there's one particular year and you need a little help just 1 year, maybe the private loans can help you. But if you're going to sit there and depend on a private loan, well, I'm your guardian angel telling you, don't do it. So if you do it, it's going to be your fault. You've had somebody come and forewarn you of that one. That's not a good idea. As a matter of fact, just to emphasize that point, and then we'll go on to the next subject. As we're sitting here right now having this meeting, there is $1.75 trillion of college loans out there. And that 1.75 is held by approximately 52 to 54 million former and present college goers. I want to put that 1.75 trillion in perspective. I want you to think of all of the consumer credit cards that there are in this country. There's over 330 million people in the country, probably 300 million adults, okay? Most adults have more than one credit card. They got a Visa, they got a Discover, they've got an Exxon or a Mobil card, they've got a Macy's card, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at the outstanding balances on all of those hundreds of millions of cards, it is actually less than the 1.75 trillion that we now have in college debt. There was a great article in the Washington Post about a year ago that showed that if about approximately 30 to 35% of those students who had these college loans were to default on the loan, they could potentially have the same effect that we saw in 2008 with the collapse of the real estate market. So just to put that in perspective. So again, I don't want the families that are listening to me today to be part of that, to be a victim of just having so much emotion in the college selection process that they just say to themselves, I'm going to borrow anything I need to. I just want to get my son or daughter through. They work so hard. I don't think that's a proper approach in the college selection process. You want to make sure you have those loans under control. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Let's go to the next slide. Now, real quick, many of you listening to me this evening have a younger student at home. Maybe it's a second or third grader, maybe it's a fifth grader, whatever. Having listened to my presentation for over an hour, actually almost a little over an hour now, I think you come to the realization that financial aid, dollar for dollar, financial aid is not going to be the be all and end all that you want it to be. And something that you can really do to help yourself is have a systematic way of saving for college education. So if you have a younger one at home and you know you have 5, 7, maybe 10 years before they go off to school, I strongly recommend that you look at a 529 plan. State of New Jersey has NJ Best, but if you do your research and you think that New York or Virginia or Alaska or someone else has a better 529 plan, go with them. You don't have to stay with New Jersey's. But one nice feature about New Jersey's, as you can see from the chart in front of you, besides how it grows in the actual savings plan itself, you get a scholarship attached to it based on the number of years that you've been contributing to the 529 plan. So you put that into the rate of return, and certainly it makes NJ Best pretty attractive over many of the other state 529 plans. So again, if you have someone younger at home and you haven't done it yet, truly give some serious thought to starting either a 529 plan or some other disciplined way of putting money systematically away for that younger child, knowing that you have quite a few years before they go off to school. It'll certainly help you to keep loan indebtedness down and give you better leverage on the type of schools that you're looking at, what you could afford. Okay, enough of that commercial on college savings. Let's go to that next slide. And we are right on the end. And if you click it 2 more times, my little icons will come up, like my little question and thing. We go bang, bang again. Here we go, questions and my little guy. And we'll just see what, from the chat line, what questions come up. And I'll do my best to answer any questions that you good people have. I wanted to make sure from this slide that once we're done this session, and 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, a question comes up and I'm not there to answer it, you've got the data, you've got the websites, you've got the phone lines, the helplines that you would need to get those questions answered. So with that, let's see what we have going for us.
Okay, so
Any questions?
So this slide will be shared. We will also be posting this as a YouTube recording or a video on our counseling webpage as well as on our YouTube channel. So we will send this out. We have your email if you registered with us prior to tonight. So we will send that out after this weekend. One of the questions that a parent had during registration was, are assets required to be disclosed, such as any retirement funds?
That's a very good question. Let me break that down for you. The way the federal methodology uses it, this is one of the prime examples of where the FAFSA is very different than the CSS profile. With the FAFSA, the assets that they want to see are things like your checking account, savings account, any stocks you may own, if you own rental properties. Those are the types of things that the FAFSA uses as assets. Anything that you have that is clearly in a retirement instrument, whether it's a 401k, an IRA, whatever it might be, and it's clearly designated that it's for retirement, the instructions on the FAFSA tell you you're not putting that down as a parental asset. Now, if you're filing CSS Profile, as I recall, there's a whole section, and in their assets, they not only want you to put the same assets that you would put on the FAFSA, but if you have retirement money as well, they want to see that on the CSS Profile. So that's one of the differences between the two.
So
good question.
So in other words, CSS Profile gets more into the nitty gritty. I do remember for the CSS Profile, they ask you what kind of investments, if you own gold.
Everything, investments, whether it's retirement or not. Yep.
Right. So they ask about, different properties, whereas FAFSA is very straightforward in regards to your taxes and so forth.
And not as introspective, not as introspective and not as robust.
Right.
It just doesn't ask the same things. If there are any, I'm going to not ask a question, but anticipate one. Unfortunately, with all the people that are on the line, there's probably at least a few who are divorced or separated. And so let me address that. If you are in a divorced situation, what the FAFSA is telling you is that the parent that the student spends the most time with during the year, that parent is the custodial parent, and therefore they're the one who would be filing the FAFSA. The non-custodial parent, the one who is out of the household, they do not ask for the non-custodial parent's income or information. Now, if the custodial parent has remarried, that means there is now a step parent in the situation, and the FAFSA does demand that you give both the custodial parent information and the step parent information as well. On CSS Profile, there's a whole section for the non-custodial parent. So again, another major difference between CSS Profile and just the FAFSA. And remember, not a lot of schools use CSS Profile. It's only, as I said to you before, those hard to get into, very competitive and very expensive universities that participate in the CSS profile form. Okay.
So typically the parent, we usually advise that, what is the address, that's listed on the student's Genesis, right? Where are they living? What is listed on their driver's license? That's a good place to start. And then just a follow up, what if, it's still married but separated?
If you are separated and you have legal documentation showing that you have a lawyer or someone representing you in the separation, then you would fill it out the same way as a divorced parent would. If you're separated and the separation is just unofficial and there's still a chance that the other spouse could come back in a month or a day or whatever, then no, there's nothing official showing that there is a true separation or divorce, and then you would be filling it out with both parents on there. So you want to make sure you have the documentation to back up what you're saying on that FAFSA.
Thank you. So there's one question from a student, I believe, and this goes along with the student's status. So do colleges and universities recognize students who are paying tuition for themselves out of pocket? And then follow up, I had a related question regarding emancipated or independent students who are no longer under any parental guardianship. So how do they go about filing the FAFSA?
Right, well, I'm going to start with that second one first. The term emancipated, for many, many years, there are lawyers who make a lot of good money emancipating a child. Unfortunately, when it comes to financial aid, emancipation means nothing in the process of filing a FAFSA. If you made the effort to get emancipated thinking that it's going to make you independent, it does not make you an independent student. The only way you can show, if you're below the age of 21, there are set distinct ways of being independent. One is you went into the service and you came out, you were honorably discharged. Number two, you married and you have your own family and you can prove that and now you're independent. Or if you want to get real heavy, you have a third-party professional. That third-party professional could be a counselor, a psychologist, a police officer, a judge. If you have documentation that shows that you were forced out of the house, either mentally or physically, and you can prove it. It's not just, I had an argument with my parents and I moved out. They don't like my boyfriend, so I got mad and I left. That's not going to work with the FAFSA. But if you have documentation showing that because of either mental or physical abuse, you had to leave the house, then you're going to be able to file it as an independent. There are thousands upon thousands of parents who tell their students, look, I love you, but you're responsible for your college costs. That does not make you an independent student when you're filing a FAFSA. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that's just a fact. Okay? It does not take the parental responsibility away. They're trying to get the strength of the family, the financial strength of the family, and those type of decisions would take money away from families who really don't have the resources to pay for college. So just keep that in mind when you're filing the FAFSA. There's clear, distinct things that the federal processor looks for. And you'll see that when you open up the FAFSA to file it. There's a whole section on independent, dependent as you go through those questions before you start filling out income and asset questions.
Do parents or students have to create a separate HESAA or NJFAMS account? Or
no, it's not separate. No, it's not separate. That's why I was saying you're sharing it together. It's one account. The student is going to go on and the student is going to create the user ID and the password. But all I was saying was that should, in my opinion, for practical purposes, that should be shared with the parent so that not only the student, but the parent can habitually and systematically look at FAMS. Because if the student just has it, experience has shown us that they might not be as disciplined in checking NJ-FAMs as they should. And, weeks and weeks could go by and nobody's out there. If both the parent and the student are looking out on FAMs, there's a higher percentage that any correspondence that you get will be addressed. That's the only point I was trying to make.
Thank you. Now, there's no deadline for filing the FAFSA. We will be providing more information during our FAFSA workshop on October 13. And again, just to reiterate, we will be sharing all the slides. There is also a slide-by-slide, step-by-step guide on FAFSA during that set time. So I wanted to reiterate, because this will answer some of our questions regarding the FAFSA. So there was a question on the FSA ID. So in order to obtain your FSA ID, you're going to go on this website, which is fsaid.ed.gov. So I will be providing instructions prior to this FAFSA workshop, October 13th. So again, one for the parent, one for the student. What you're going to do is you're going to register for an account for an FSA ID. That is going to be linked to your Social Security number. So one for the student, one for the parent. And what that gets used is for the end of the application when you have to provide an electronic signature, because again, this is a financial document. So both student and parent must sign with the FSA ID. And I've also listed other required documents. So you could bring a copy of your 2021 federal tax income return, or there is the IRS retrieval tool that John had mentioned earlier that is within the FAFSA application. Is there anything else I'm missing? If you don't have a social, and there are different statuses for different students, can you kind of add to that, John? If this
What's that?
If the student does not have a Social Security number, or the parent.
If the student does not have a Social Security number, in my vast experience with this, that tells me that they're not a U.S. citizen. I have personally, over 45 years, never seen a situation where I have a U.S. citizen that does not have a Social Security number. I just haven't come across it. And if they are not a U.S. citizen, bad news is they cannot fill out a FAFSA. The good news is, in New Jersey, there is something called alternative FAFSA. So if you went out to the HESAA.org website, HESAA.org, you'll see something on alternative FAFSA. It's also called Dreamers. And the state of New Jersey will allow you to file a financial aid form through them, because you can't get federal money if you're not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. And compete for, be processed for in-state financial assistance. Not many states have that. So again, Sinye, I don't know how many non-U.S. citizens you have in your high school district, but if you have them and they're looking for college, one nice thing about New Jersey is they can go out to that alternative. They can't file the FAFSA, but they can go to the HESA.org website and fill out the alternative FAFSA.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify that October 1st is when FAFSA opens. It doesn't mean that it's the deadline. So as John had mentioned earlier, you're not trying to earn concert tickets. It's not first come, first serve. But you are encouraged to look at each, typically each college does have kind of a deadline, and it's typically by April. Some have it by March. They will let you know. So it's good to have it done simultaneously as you are applying to the app, to actually fill out the application. We have some students who have green cards, so alien registration numbers. Many of them are provided with Social Security numbers, so that they will ask you to match your Social Security number to you. And what happens is when you go and create, and there are slides on our counseling webpage as well, when you go to create your FSA ID, it will make you wait 24 hours for the Social Security Administration. So basically our government database to verify your identification. So it does take 24 hours for for that FSA ID to go through. You can start the workshop. I mean, you can start the application once October 1st, opens the application. You can also, there are at Middlesex County College, as well as in our workshop, there are representatives that run this workshop that can help you do a step-by-step guide to complete the application. Let me see if there's any more questions. Okay, so in terms of, I did include here to, records of balances in checking and savings accounts, but you don't have to submit bank statements in order to qualify for financial aid.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. You do not need to show any foreign investments, as far as I'm concerned, for FAFSA.
Sinye?
Yes.
There is one thing I think that would be helpful, since it seems like quite a few of your parents are not senior parents. They're either junior or sophomore parents that are listening in right now.
Yes. So yes, the workshop, the FAFSA, you are filing for FAFSA when you are a senior, essentially, for the first time.
Yeah, but what I wanted to mention is this. That workshop that you're going to have on the 13th is specifically for seniors.
Yes.
Because of something coming down the pike called the Fafsa Simplification Act. We haven't gotten full yet, but there is going to be major changes for those junior and sophomore parents when they're filing it, just so everybody's aware of that. What the parents of seniors are going to be doing this year is completely different, probably, than what's going to happen 12 months from now, for the 24-25 academic year, So just to be aware of that. It's called the Fafsa Simplification Act. It looks like it's going to get through Congress, and when it does, we'll start getting the details somewhere between late November and early January. We'll start getting the details on that, and then be ready for that for the next cycle.
Yes. So
just so you know.
Great. Thank you so much. So for our current seniors, you will still need to create an FSA ID, one for a parent, one for student. If you have a child who's, already in college right now, and you've already completed the FAFSA for that child, for, your other sibling, and you already have an FSA ID, then you don't need to create another one. So it's per individual. So if you are a parent with multiple students going into college or currently in college, you can use that same FSA ID. So again, we have, someone mentioned FAFSA is linked to your social security number. So there, it is good also for permanent residents.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so I think that is all the time that we have. If you do have additional questions, you can feel free. You can reach out to me. Again, I'm Mrs. Muglia. Thank you so much, John, for your time this evening. Again, this video will be posted along with the presentation on our college counseling webpage, as well as the school counseling webpage.
Well, thank you, and I hope it was helpful for everyone who attended.